I've spent much of my career lurking around sites of contamination, toxic pollution, radioactive debris in Japan, China, France, and elsewhere, trying to tell stories about the people who navigate these spaces of ambiguity, accusation, and harm. For the past few years, I've shifted towards finding ways to communicate a different threat, slower, more diffuse, vastly more difficult to comprehend. Most of the time, the specialists who are laboring to understand it rely on supercomputers, dense sensor networks, and streams of telemetry to try to make sense of what they're seeing. And now I'm here with you this evening. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you. The climate crisis isn't coming. It's already here, rearranging the world around us. The past 3 years have been the 3 hottest years on record. Shall we go back further? The past 11 years were the 11 hottest years ever recorded. But this isn't just a story about heat alone. It's the acute sensitivity of a tightly coupled system where each fractional degree reverberates through oceans, air, communities, and environments, amplifying extremes. We are entering a climate reckoning. You can see it already. Stronger hurricanes, longer flooding seasons, more devastating wildfires that are harder to contain. Systems we depend on, precarious systems like the Gulf Stream, are becoming unstable, edging towards collapse. Polar ice is already shifting. And what has our response been to this historic crisis of epic proportions? Yeah. It hasn't been nothing, but let's face it, it hasn't been nearly enough. And it hasn't been anywhere near fast enough. Added to which, much of the population in major nations rejects the idea that there's anything much at all to worry about. We've got a bit of work to do, to be honest. There's no call for sugarcoating the message. Dirty, pollutant energy in the form of fossil fuels created much of the current problem on Earth. So it is only logical that finding cleaner ways to produce energy is a major piece of the puzzle in nudging our own planet's atmosphere back towards something that works. In making this happen, decarbonizing our energy systems is key. You don't need a crystal ball to see what's coming. In the next several years, people across very different societies will start to feel it more directly. Scarier, more conspicuous, more relentless disasters in particular. Yet something else is happening. More and more people are turning towards electric technologies. That shift isn't necessarily ideological or normative or performative. After all, in many cases, these products not only offer some savings, but can be shown to be objectively better. Electric induction stoves boil water faster than gas, and they do it more safely. Heat pumps, which are used in the heating and cooling of homes and institutions, deliver the same comfort, but with far less energy. A small, simple electric outboard fishing boat, which you might take out on a pond with rod and reel, is almost silent, barely vibrating, and less likely to startle the fish. Electric cars accelerate faster than old-style cars, and in a blackout, they can help you cook dinner and keep the lights on at home when you get home, because for a time, you can use the battery inside the car in your home, and vice versa. So perhaps with these products, their chief drawback is their unfamiliarity. But electricity is only as green as the means of generating it on the grid. So what then is the best, cleverest, most efficient, most scalable way to produce that energy? My work is an attempt to arrive at a verdict on this clarion question. Today, I have arranged a brief, thrilling matchup, head-to-head matchup between the 2 main contenders, nuclear versus renewables. But first, let's digress to a related question that affects them both. The billowing black smoke and the stench are a bit of a giveaway. Burning fossil fuels like oil, gas, and coal releases a lot of carbon. Planet Earth has its own intricate systems for managing carbon. For a long time, those systems worked, but they have been overwhelmed. Why? Because they are now dealing with two streams at once: the carbon of our time and the carbon of deep time. Every time someone yanks a starter cord and fires up a lawnmower, the noisy, rattling machine begins releasing carbon that has been locked away for millions of years. Such carbon derives from myriad tiny microorganisms and swamp things and the like that have died, accumulated, decayed, and transformed in the ultimate low and slow pressure cook sous vide process. The carbon trapped underground, eventually transforming into hydrocarbons or fossil fuels. In other words, this is energy derived from death, from extinction, from deep time, oozing forth from life forms that are long gone. In opposition to this, today I'd like to talk about what we might call living energy, a phrase used by talented science writer Matthew Hudson. What do I mean by living energy? Dynamic and adaptable. Living energy flows from the forces available on the planet without unduly contributing to the destruction of the planet. Imagine solar, wind, arguably maybe nuclear here. Another intriguing example of living energy that likely doesn't spring to mind for most people is the sort of Stone Age energy storage that has begun to take off via a range of inventive startups. A clever fusion of cave dweller physics and cutting-edge engineering. New storage technologies are opening up a whole range of ways to harness what we might call living energy. At heart, the idea is elemental. Imagine a boulder sitting at the top of a hill. Because of gravity, that rock holds stored energy. Push it, and that stored energy turns into motion, which scientists call kinetic energy. That is energy storage in its simplest form. But if you can store energy effectively, you can solve a whole cascade of problems. You stabilize the grid. You smooth out intermittency. You make renewables steadier. You make nuclear less inflexible with its slow start and long shutdown. So imagine this. You use green energy to push that same boulder back up the hill. Then when you need power, you let it roll down and back down again using gravity as a battery. In some cases, the boulder in question is literal weight, a massive load, lowered deep into a disused mine shaft, for instance, and then lifted back up again, often using surplus green energy, ready to be released at a moment's notice when demand spikes. And behind all this is an elegant grift, finding ways to hold on to energy in a world where the timing of supply rarely matches the timing of need. Beyond the gravity systems I've described here, there are dozens of others. Sometimes the schemes that sometimes feel like an over-the-top, super keen, hyper-ingenious set of exhibits in a science museum or something. For instance, ultra-cold cryogenics used to cool and liquefy air to about minus 200 degrees Celsius. When needed, the air is reheated, expanding violently and driving turbines. Or ultra-hot carbon blocks heated to about 2,000 degrees centigrade. Also molten salts, which can be stoked into molten liquid reservoirs inside very high-spec thermoses. Or compressed air in caverns, or certain common geologies of rock. And chemical approaches, where the chemistry can be reversed to release stored energy when it's needed. There are even kinetic systems. Taken together, these approaches feel less like a single technology than a kind of nerd-led renaissance in how we think about energy itself. They point away from an energy economy organized around scarcity towards something closer to managed abundance. If we can learn to align supply with demand, moment by moment, within each storage system. No single solution has to do everything. Each of these units could be mass deployed, sited in numerous suitable places, like massive batteries. And they wouldn't peter out over time like your laptop battery or your smartphone battery or the TV remote. Significantly, these energy storage approaches aren't limited to renewable systems at all, per se. Any grid can benefit from reliable storage, and these elemental strategies offer advantages across almost any energy paradigm. But back to the thrilling contest. Which is it going to be, nuclear or renewables? My work in Japan, China, parts of Europe, and North America has tried to get to the bottom of this. For instance, Germany is preparing to launch a hydrogen economy involving Europe and at least one country in Africa. Hydrogen products are also a sort of battery that you can transport. Finland has a relatively homogeneous population that tends to trust its institutions. Lucky them. Finns have largely accepted their government's argument that nuclear is the way to go. Gorgeous, hurricane-battered Puerto Rico, with its notorious grid problems and frequent outages, has been quietly engaged in a solar transformation. And China has built more solar than any country on Earth, by far, while still maintaining a nuclear sector, and while still getting up to 60% of its electricity from a particularly dirty form of coal. So my project has found some important and intriguing material, but perhaps nowhere encapsulates the issue better than the home of the Dutch. The Netherlands offers a fascinating case study in how a highly industrialized and competent nation confronts the high-stakes competition that we have before us. On paper, nuclear might seem to be a natural fit here. The Netherlands is small, densely populated, and highly engineered. Land is scarce. A collection of nuclear plants would, in theory, have a small footprint. But when the conservative-led Dutch government embarked upon a serious national debate around 2024, the result was not the clear embrace of nuclear. Instead, it revealed a country very much of two minds. It was significant and telling that on March 4th, 2024, 13 pro-nuclear EU nations, including the Netherlands, signed a statement urging stronger EU backing for nuclear power, while simultaneously, a 13-member pro-renewables group, again including the Netherlands, endorsed a separate statement calling for a focus on renewables and power grids. That is to say, the Netherlands signed both communiques on the same day, no less. The Netherlands does have a single reactor, Borsele, operating since 1973. But it's aging, and plans to replace or expand nuclear capacity have repeatedly slipped. And this is where the reality of nuclear begins to intrude. Building new reactors is slow, complex, expensive. To put this in perspective, a large nuclear project, about 1.6 gigawatts, might take 10 to 15 years just to build and put online, from the first pour of concrete, and closer to 15 or even 20 years from initial decision to actual electricity. By contrast, you can build 1.6 gigawatts of solar or wind in a matter of a few years, sometimes much faster, and begin generating power in stages along the way, rather than waiting over a decade for the first kilowatt hour. In the Netherlands, by 2024, it had become clear that earlier hopeful scenarios, such as bringing new nuclear online by the mid-2030s, were going to be impossible to accomplish. The Netherlands began turning away from nuclear and began leaning more heavily into renewables, not out of ideology, but out of pragmatism. Take Zeewolde, the wind park about 50 kilometers east of Amsterdam, where I spent some time in 2025. The project recently became one of the largest onshore wind projects in Europe by upgrading an existing site. The wind park delivers about a third of a gigawatt of power, and it was built in roughly 2 to 3 years. Scale that up, and you begin to see the difference. Five projects like Zeewolde, get you to the scale of a large nuclear plant, and you can build them in parallel in a fraction of the time. Momentum is shifting towards renewables here, not because they're perfect, but because they're deployable, scalable, and increasingly, somewhat bewilderingly, economical. If that works in the Netherlands, one of Europe's most smallest, most crowded nations, then it should offer a signal to the rest of the world. Now, it may not seem like much of a battle to a worldly audience such as yourselves, as we have here tonight, but I assure you this competition between renewables and nuclear has been on the boil for quite some time, for decades indeed. Like the legendary rumble in the jungle between Muhammad Ali and George Foreman, or a much hyped matchup for the Ultimate Fighting Championship. This bout has been long promised, heavily overpromoted, thick with trash talk and sandbagging, and influenced by powerful interests on both sides. The fact that the contest took place in a nation like the Netherlands, long dedicated to evidence-based policy decisions, not to mention in the EU, where most everyone is legally bound to doing something grown up about climate change, made this prize fight between nuclear and renewables even sweeter. Global energy and policy sector enthusiasts finally got to see the much debated slugfest with a sober referee and a watchful judges table. Nuclear entered the ring jacked, with decades of extraordinary public investment behind it, running into the hundreds of billions of dollars, and likely into the trillions worldwide, as well as deep institutional backing, munificent corporate support, and enviable establishment access in its corner. But the lean, scrappy underdog with the fancy footwork, who doesn't know how to lie down for the count, renewables, stepped into the ring, ready for a proper Donnybrook. The challenger and the green trunks held their own, fought back, shook off some low blows, and came out victorious in the later rounds, winning by decision. Now, as with any fraught outcome, there will be howls of indignation, strident calls for a rematch, and all manner of spin. The stakes could hardly be higher. A glance at the news will give a glimpse of this turbulence. War targeting energy infrastructure, oil prices vaulting upwards, the ever-tense Strait of Hormuz, an historic AI boom, proliferations of devices shaped by surveillance capitalism, not to mention resource-hungry data centers springing up like poisonous mushrooms all around us. In no way does any of this suggest that demand for energy is going to go down. In a rapidly warming and changing world, there is a surge of low-carbon energy coming. Nuclear will craft a comeback, but the shiny, oversized belt of the winner now girds the sweaty, chiseled abs of renewables. Thank you.